What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. We're back! We're back, everybody! We're back, everyone, back from the cruise. And it was so fun. If you want to hear about like the whole cruise experience, I've got a vlogging channel. You can find the link down in the description. I've already got a bunch of videos there, but I'll probably like tell stories from the cruise, like James and the Puerto Ricans. Dude, it was a crazy story. Anyway, I am refreshed and I am back and I am ready to talk about some stuff. The Totality. Let me tell you guys something about Scott Snyder's storytelling. All right, for those people who are basically new to like DC Universe, right? They're kind of like, okay, so I want to go read Justice League. It's basically Justice League #1. It's written by Scott Snyder. Here's the important thing to bear in mind. Scott Snyder's storytelling can be read in one of two ways. Either it can be read in isolation, which is entirely possible, or it can be read cohesively, and it makes it all the better, right? Like if you really, really wanted to appreciate this whole thing in its full capacity, I mean, you could probably go all the way back to like Grant Morrison's Batman run. Basically, like when Batman died during the events of Final Crisis, you could start with Final Crisis and then go into Batman, you know, like the Return of Bruce Wayne, and then go into like Batman Eternal, and then go into New 52 Batman, run all the way up through like Death of the Family and Batman Endgame and all that kind of stuff, and then go into like Dark Knight's Metal and then read this. It makes for like some epic ass storytelling. It's just like one giant cohesive story. And that's why it's so cool, because what we know up to this point is that there was basically this item, this object that was referred to as the Totality, and nobody really knows what it is, but it's essentially like this sort of power of creation. If someone manages to harness it, they'll basically be able to kind of recreate the universe. And the reason why is because after the events of Dark Knight's Metal, or really during the events of Dark Knight's Metal, this led to cracks in the source wall. And so much like having having like the Hoover Dam leaking water, it's only a matter of time before those leaks turn into just like a massive explosion of water forcing itself through. And that's what's happening with the source wall. The source wall is this barrier around the multiverse, and basically it's dying. And so when this clock strikes down to zero, whoever is in possession of this totality could potentially have the ability to like recreate all of existence unto themselves. And so that's why it's really kind of like a mad race for this thing. And so in this desire to harness this power, Lex Luthor and the Joker had basically stowed away in the bodies of Superman and Martian Manhunter. And they were basically tasked with going in and exploring the whole idea of the Totality, which led to Lex Luthor and the Joker seizing control of them and then trying to seize the power of the Totality from themselves. Now, of course, Batman and Hawkgirl were along for the ride as guides, not knowing Joker and Lex Luthor was there, which basically led to Joker and Lex Luthor taking out Batman and Hawkgirl, and then just kind of things unfolding from there. So again, we'll talk more about this as we go through, but still, it's a pretty cool thing. What we get here is basically Batman popping back up after having believed to have been killed by the cells of Superman when his ship was destroyed and he was left, you know, sort of free-floating in Superman's body. And Lex Luthor is kind of astonished by the fact that he's there. Now, with Lex Luthor facing off against Bruce, this is not something you normally see. To see Lex Luthor and Batman face off is cool because this is really more of a battle of wits. Lex Luthor is not really a fighter, right? He's not really like a hand-to-hand fighter in the same capacity as Batman, but Lex Luthor, I would argue, is smarter. And so when you're talking about these guys who are sort of facing off, it's a battle of wits. And that's why it works, is because Lex Luthor talks some incredible trash here. He basically tells Batman, like, you know, you're a child who's driven by nightmares. I'm a man driven by dreams. I will go on to achieve great things because at the end of the day, you live and die by the memory of your parents. I live and die by greatness. And so it's just like, damn, Lex Luthor, man, talking some serious shit. It's pretty cool. Now, of course, this switches over to Barry Allen, and it's a really cool thing. This is why I say Scott Snyder writing Justice League like this is kind of bringing back a lot of familiar things like the Legion of Doom. But the Legion of Doom had always, by and large, just kind of been this, you know, Super Friends hokey team that was always defeated. Like, well, we'll get you next time, Justice League. But with Scott Snyder bringing them into Justice League like this in the DC Universe run, dude, it elevates Legion of Doom to just being like powerhouses, because having like all these new sources of energy, the Sage Force, the Still Force, different things like that, it allows them to use them in a variety of different ways. Where Barry Allen's speed is to just move really, really fast, then what happens if you take away his ability to move? And that's what the Still Force does. It shuts down his ability to move at super speed, and he can't move at all. Well, then of what use is a Flash that can't run? Where you end up having like Barry Allen being taunted by Gorilla Grodd, all the while Grodd's response is like, it's amazing that you're able to move. Like, it's cool that you're so in tune with the Speed Force, or at least what passes for the Speed Force now, because it doesn't really exist. But it's cool that you're able to move so fast that you can move about a centimeter or two. That's astonishing to me. So like, keep running, keep moving forward. And in about 2 centuries, you'll finally reach the door over there. Like, dude, Dude, it's so awesome. Now, of course, in response to Lex Luthor being seized upon by Batman, this leads to him contacting the Joker, who of course is controlling Martian Manhunter, and then, the Joker basically using Martian Manhunter to attack Superman. So it's cool because you have like these multiple layers here. And so of course this leads to Hawkgirl kind of stepping up and then incapacitating the Joker temporarily, and then in turn, by the time this happens, there's really not much that can be done because of course Lex Luthor has this doorknob. Now, this doorknob has been a very ambiguous thing throughout the Justice League run by Scott Snyder so far. We don't really know what the purpose was that it serves, but I found this interview that he did, and basically what he said is that this is kind of like a barometer, that what this doorknob does is it kind of gives us an indication of how bad things are, right? Like as this doorknob glows with more and more energy, what it means is that like these other forces out there are being harnessed. And so it's almost like once this thing reaches 100%, then like everybody's screwed. And it's kind of cool here because it gives us this little sort of stepping stone. But using the power of these energy sources that are out there, Lex Luthor casts Batman and Superman and Martian Manhunter right back to the Justice League Watchtower, basically boots them out, and he's basically in the presence of the Totality all by itself. And so what this does is this leads to a bit of panic. You have Lex Luthor who's right over there in the Totality. We don't have anybody who can stop him. At the same time, you've got like Umbrax and these billions, if not trillions, of ultraviolet lanterns all bombarding the Hall of Justice, which basically serves as a distraction, which is actually pretty smart. We don't know the full might and the full brunt of what they can do, but we do know they are exceedingly powerful. And so in response to this, Cyborg and Martian Manhunter and John Stewart come up with this idea that if humanity is in this position whereby they're basically being made to feel all their worst emotions and all their worst individual fears, and all that in turn is giving way to like all this massive amount of hate and like, entropy and so on, which Umbrax is feeding on, and then in turn, like trying to convert the Earth into like a giant ultra lantern, more or less, then why not unite them in that capacity? Like, why not force people to realize they're not the only ones who have felt failure and different things like that? It is John Stewart and Cyborg really kind of counting on Martian Manhunter to unite all the minds of everybody across the world, where you basically have like Martian Manhunter reaching out to every single superhero, to every single human being, and basically saying, all of us have all felt fear, and they all see the other's fears. They all see the other's failures. It's not like they're kind of operating unto themselves. Every single human being across the face of the world, hero or otherwise, feels the fears of every other single human being, and it basically unites them in a way that hasn't really happened before. And so in this moment, it's kind of a funny thing, because what happens is it basically kind of forces Umbrax back for a second. In their united minds, humanity comes to the realization that they all are basically part of like a singular consciousness, that they all are united under the banner of the desire to be alive. And in doing so, the Earth itself is transformed into a white lantern. And it's the craziest thing ever. Craziest thing I ever saw. A white lantern Earth. It is, oh dude, it is so cool. This is why I say Scott Snyder is amazing when it comes to writing this stuff. And so what you have is you have a united Earth. Now what this does is it really kind of seems to offer itself as like a barrier for protection from Umbrax, which really kind of prevents it from going through and seizing control. But remember, this is them walking on a knife's edge, because you're talking about people, you're talking about an entire race of beings who have never experienced single consciousness before. And so it could be very easy for them to just kind of break off and to fall back down to their lesser sides, which is the danger that's being posed here. And that's kind of the back and forth that's going on between humanity and like Sinestro. Now, at the same time that this is going on, you've also got Barry Allen here. And it's kind of cool because Barry Allen is focusing on a role different from what he normally does. The role of a speedster is to just move as fast as humanly possible, or I guess as fast as any speedster can move. That's the basis of their character. But then suddenly you're thrust into a situation where the Flash can't run super fast, where the Flash is going to have to run, like he's basically going to have to slow himself down almost infinitely. Like every single cell, every single atom in his body is going to have to be slowed down to the point of non-movement. But it works because what this means is that this potentially allows either Scott Snyder himself or a future writer to come along, use this concept of Barry tapping into the still force and then like granting it a whole new level of power. There's a lot of different things that you could do with this, like shut off a speedster's power to the speed force. There's a lot of things that you could do, and it's super cool because it opens up all these different doors to all these different abilities that Barry as the Flash could have later on down the line. Now, while this is happening, they're also, within the Legion of Doom headquarters, being bombarded by like, Black Manta and Cheetah and so on and so forth. And so where you've got Aquaman and you've got Wonder Woman in there coaxing Barry back into essentially slowing himself down to tap into still force and basically shut off the momentum of Umbrax and kind of push it back into its, dimension, for lack of a better word. You end up having Aquaman break out, and of course he basically ends up contacting, ends up talking to like a whole bunch of like sharks and stuff like that in order to have them attack Black Manta to cease their attack. And then in turn, like you have Lex Luthor, who's basically defeated by Hawkgirl, or at least in the incident seems to be the case that he's basically defeated by Hawkgirl. But what this does is it allows the Justice League to win. And it's crazy because what ends up happening here is that in this moment, with Umbrax being forced out, with these sort of rifts being closed more or less, then in turn, the entire conflict ends in the blink of an eye. Because what it means is that Barry's seen something. Like Barry has basically seen the true nature of the totality. He's seen the true nature of this power behind it all. And where he initially tries to shy away, Scott Snyder doesn't tell us exactly what he saw. Now, if I were a gambling man, I would basically say that Barry Allen saw that Dr. Manhattan was behind everything. But he was just a peek. What he got was a look through a keyhole, more or less. And it's kind of crazy because Scott Snyder kind of builds on this in saying that Vandal Savage didn't become a bad guy because it was just kind of fun. He became a bad guy out of necessity. Because when this singularity, or I guess when this totality was on its mission and eventually going to crash on Earth in the modern day, it is sort of phased in and out of time. And so it meant that along the way, Vandal Savage had seen this totality and had gained a glimpse of what it was about, where the creation of the multiverse came from, and in realizing that, was terrified of what he saw, and basically became a villain to ensure that nobody would be able to access the power of this totality. So again, a lot of ambiguity here, a lot of questions that are kind of being left unanswered, but it really kind of seems to be Snyder pointing to the direction of saying like Manhattan is the cause of all this, but it could be entirely wrong. So again, we're really kind of grasping at straws here. There's no absolute answers. We're not really given any visions. We're just kind of given little bits of clues here and there and little bits of tidbits and different things like that. But of course, this leads to Lex Luthor being booted away from the totality and Hawkgirl being the one to seize it for herself. And so in this moment, she takes it back to the Hall of Justice, and that's what ends up happening with the Justice League. As the Justice League basically sits down, you have Justice League Dark, you've got the Justice League of America, you've got the Justice League team. They kind of sit down and they say, our job is to now analyze this thing. But notice, the totality has kind of a blue aura that's very reminiscent of Dr. Manhattan. And so they're kind of like, we're going to analyze this thing, we're going to study this thing, and we're going to see what this is about. We're going to gain answers from it so that if we can, either we can use it to stop the destruction of the multiverse, or when the multiverse dies, we can kind of recreate it. And so again, it's a pretty dangerous game, because this is what the Justice League has continually done, and has only ever made things worse. And so in the face of defeat, what ends up happening is that in the middle of all this, suddenly the entire Justice League is met by the arrival of Starman, who basically says, look, like, I can show you guys how to fix everything, but that means that like 3 of you are going to have to die in the process. Now, in truth, my experience on the character of Starman is not the most well-versed, but if I were, if I were a betting man, I would say this is probably Will Payton. That's who it looks to be. Will Payton was a character who originally appeared back in, I want to say it was on Solo series back in like 1988 in the post-crisis landscape. Anyway, he was struck by a satellite and basically ended up, getting like super speed and strength and durability, and, he could fly. But nonetheless, he was an interesting character. To see him return here is kind of intriguing because I don't really know what role he's going to play. I mean, of course, it really hints at the fact that like 3 members of the Justice League are going to die over the course of what's happening. And to me, that really seems to be an indication that DC, if I'm being honest, DC kind of seems to be like careening towards a reboot. Is really kind of like, well, maybe not a reboot, but someone's like a reset. We're going to get like the Doomsday Clock story. And I think this is going to kind of like reset everything, sort of 0-hour crisis in time. The multiverse blinks out of existence and then comes back, and suddenly everything's set back to the way that it's supposed to be before a New 52. I'm not 100% sure. Again, it's really kind of a guessing game here. But with regards to Lex Luthor himself, with regards to facing defeat at the hands of the Justice League, this is amazing because Lex Luthor realizes that what he needs is an unstable element, a bit of chaos. Because when it comes to the Legion of Doom, despite the fact that they are heightened, at the end of the day, they still are relatively predictable because their powers are familiar to the Justice League. What they need is complete and total chaos, an unpredictable character. And so what ends up happening is Lex Luthor transitions down into the bowels of the Legion of Doom and simply tells somebody, you were 100% right, I need your help, I can't do this on my own, only for us to find out the person he's talking to is the Batman who laughs. So it's just like, damn, like, it's pretty badass, guys. So I am extremely excited to find out where this ends up going. I'm pretty hyped about this. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explain, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.